What's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of the Around the ATL podcast. I'm Blake, joined by both my co-hosts this time around, Mike O'Neill and Dylan Clearfield. So, sorry guys, a couple days ago we meant to film this podcast. We were coming to you guys on the night of July 23rd, 2023, in the current process of watching the Mets get crapped on Sunday Night Baseball. Always a good time watching that. But we meant to film for you guys Thursday night going into the Milwaukee Brewers series. A lot of stuff came up behind the scenes, but the enlightenment to that is it allowed time for Dylan to join us in this second episode. So our apologies once again. This episode meant to come out a couple days ago. There's been a little bit of technology issues. Work with us. We're still a new podcast after all, but we're happy to hear from you guys tonight. And I'm gonna turn it over to my co-host. I'm gonna start with Micah first. His returning member of the show, and then Dylan. I want to let the listeners know all about you. So how you been the last week or so, Micah?
Been good, like said, we tried to get podcast recorded. A couple of days ago, we ran into some issues with me getting home late, then some behind the scene issues, then technology issues right now. So just trying to look out for y'all.
I see you working the iPhone stand the best of your ability. We're glad that you found a way to join us. But of course, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. Our new co-host who plans to be with us quite a bit as well, the big UGA fan, the Norcross alumni, Dylan Clearfield. How you doing? Tell us all about yourself.
This is the second episode. The first one I'm on because, again, behind the scenes, some stuff that I wasn't able to join the first one, but happy to be here tonight. And so as Blake mentioned, I just graduated from Norcross High School in Gwinnett County, Norcross, Georgia. Yes. Had some really fun times with stuff in there with some good sports teams, everything like that. I've done sports media as like a very passionate version of sports media for about a little over a year is when I fully started being invested into it. And now I'll be at UGA in the fall. And part of the reason we couldn't film this earlier is because I was at UGA for a freshman event. I'll be at University of Georgia in the fall studying journalism, interviewing players, taking pictures of sports, broadcasting, podcasting, for example, sports writing, that kind of thing. So that's I don't know if y'all introduced yourselves in the first one, but that's kind of what I'm about and what I'll be trying to bring to this podcast and other sports media stuff that I'll be continuing to do as I head into UGA in the fall and anything after that.
Yeah, man. I mean, we're glad to have you on. And one thing I know you just said that you got to cover a lot of great teams in high school. As someone who graduated from Lassiter a year before you, a good team wasn't really a thing. It was just you do it or you don't. And I got to call, the Lassiter games my junior and senior year. My senior year was really good. Caught a game-winning field goal. Called a game the same night the Braves did the World Series parade. But it's good to see that we're on a similar trajectory, and we're glad to have you on the show. But without further ado, guys, I think we got some Atlanta sports headlines to talk about. I know that we all enjoy these teams very much, and if you guys are willing to get started, I guess we'll get things underway. We'll kick things off with the Atlanta Braves, being that they're in season. And before we get to that, I'll just make sure first time listener, first time viewers, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe on any platform you guys end up seeing it on. Whether it's something of Dylan's, mine, Micah, I clip out. We appreciate all the support kindly, and we'll start with the Atlanta Braves again due to the behind the scenes hiccup. We meant to do this episode before the Milwaukee Brewers series that wrapped up today. So we're going to mention the homestand and everything that happened with it first with the White Sox and the Diamondbacks separately for a couple minutes. Then we'll go into the Milwaukee series. So we're going to start off with the Braves homestand recap. Of course, their first week of play out of the All-Star break, they go 2-4, dropping 4 games in the middle of this 6-game stretch, finding a way to win on getaway day versus Zach Gallen, and of course winning the first night against Michael Kopech and Touki Toussaint of the White Sox. What was I'll start with Dylan here since he's the new guy. What was your original takeaway to some of the mishaps that came up and some of the injuries that kind of lagged the Braves quickly out of the All-Star break?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously starting out 1-0 was like, all right, cool, and then losing 4 straight was not fun. Obviously, the concerns had to pile up, especially after losing the series to Chicago, which has been the definition of mediocre, and even this season they're not too good. Losing the first 2 games, including some games that you would think that we could have easily pulled out. especially the 16-13 game. That was very unfortunate. Just like you scored 13 runs, you should win. But I mean, the pitching just didn't show up. Some defense, all that kind of stuff. For me personally as well, with the last loss of that stand and the last win, so the last two games against Arizona, I was there just with some friends for both of those games, and so I was able to see firsthand how those games went. The first one, Morton ran into some trouble. Obviously, didn't break. He bent pretty heavily. Didn't like break, but he gave up, I think, 3 or 4 runs. Offense didn't really come through. We did have some opportunities, but we didn't really come through. Especially the bottom of the ninth felt good to me. We had some good vibes going, especially when Acuna scored on that wild pitch, and then or Acuna's double really started it off. That was just kind of, the momentum just kind of changed after that. But so we lost that game, obviously. But I think the last game was really a nice way to get in the right direction. That pitcher's duel was very nice to see. Strider obviously gave up that 3-run homer to break up his shutout in the top of the 7th, I believe. And then obviously the Braves, we were hoping for some comeback magic from the 2018, 2019 Braves and everything like that. Those type of vibes. The previous night, we got him in the day game on Wednesday. Got some key hits from Austin Riley, who was insane. He went off in that series. Matt Olson had some great contributions as well. There were just it was a bunch of, I believe it was 3-run homer in the 7th or the 8th to tie it or take the lead. And then obviously Iglesias came in and scared us a little bit, but he got it done. He got it done with a rollover to Olson. So that was a nice way to end the homestand. But now, as you were saying, we have gone on to Milwaukee, and that series is kind of went okay. It went all right. But homestand overall, 2-4, not great, but also our division lead I don't think it's lost any ground. I think it actually gained somehow. So I think we're sitting all right. We just gotta work on some stuff. And you mentioned the injuries. I don't want to take too much time. You mentioned the injuries. Rosario's injury, I didn't actually see what happened to him, but I know that he was removed from the game, as well as Hilliard's with
hamstring tightness.
Hamstring. Got it. And Hilliard had the awkward step at first base, and I believe on Wednesday I called into Dukes and Bell about this, that I'm kind of concerned about the left field situation just because of Pillar's reckless style of play, even though he's been pretty healthy over his career in general, even when it's, especially recently when he's been getting older and everything like that, making crazy plays, like he had that sliding catch he made either Wednesday or Tuesday. I'm a little bit concerned about that, just considering if he goes down, then who are we really left with? Especially in the next few weeks, maybe when those other guys that are come back from the IL,
White, Forrest Wall
aren't there. We have Forrest Wall maybe, right, as you said. Otherwise, can sign a random free agent. I don't know. That was one of my. I know that everyone wants to mention the pitching, but I just wanted to mention something different. Like that could be also a deadline concern as well, with relation to this homestand that kind of caused some concerns a little bit. With the deadline only 8 days away.
Yeah, you covered quite a lot there. And one thing I love that you mentioned that you called into Dukes and Bell Wednesday. Mike and I are, of course, big Dukes and Bell listeners as well. I think they are a big platform for maybe why we have the passion that we have. I've called into their show multiple times. I know Micah has as well. So if Carl or Mike or even Squidbilly is out there listening, we really appreciate it. And we love what you guys are doing for the community and you have for the last decade. But yeah, to go back to the homestand real quick before I get to you, Micah, because I know you probably won't have quite as much to say. To speak on the losses real quick, I think the one thing that did worry me that I think could carry over to a healthy Braves team in the playoffs is this reminded me a lot of the NLDS last year, and the fact that they had that week off. They were rolling going into that Tampa Bay series, and the break came up. They had that 4-day off period. They win that game Friday night. They looked pretty good in the process. They beat up on a pitcher that's just pretty much at the end of his glory days, and they go on to lose the next 4. You lose. Let's look at the NLDS, for example. The Braves are probably going to end up winning this division and being a top 2 seed in the National League. They're going to be better than the NL Central winner. Even if the Dodgers, whoever wins the NL West, were to surpass them, the Braves are going to be a top 2 seed. They're going to get the bye during the wild card series. The one thing that did worry me, they looked a lot like they did last year going into that Philadelphia series where they had that week off and they came out very rusty. They lost 3 of 4 out of the break, 4 of 5 even, before winning that game against Zach Gallen. You do that in the NLDS, you're done. Your season's over. You're eliminated. So that's one thing I do not like to see, that carryover effect of that rest still does equal rust with this ball club. That's something that they do need to be able to turn around come October if they do not want another early exit versus a hot wildcard winning team. But I mean, in regards to the Diamondback series in itself, being that they were able to take that last game, especially against Zach Gallen, Austin Riley, as you said, had an incredible series, maybe his most, best series so far of the year, until this weekend, even maybe up there for contention. Being that you were able to win that game, all of a sudden there's no tiebreaker involved with the Diamondbacks. You're 3-3. You find a way to win that last game. You'd like to think the Braves are probably going to finish with a better record than the Diamondbacks if all hell doesn't break loose, and you're sitting in a really good place with them. That was a big win in its own right. Against the White Sox, you said it, a minute ago, Dylan. They're very mediocre. They're a team that's very much underachieved. They were in a very similar stance to us just a couple years ago. They looked like a team that would be contending for pennants, AL Central crowns, everything along those sorts. And people haven't developed. Tony La Russa came along, made things even worse, and it just hasn't worked at all for them. So I really do think that team is a lot better than what the record says. They came on. They barely were able to find a way to win on Saturday night. Tim Anderson was able to turn a really nice double play on Sean Murphy to get him out of that game. So while I'm not worried as a whole, I think it's just, as you said, Dylan, it's those minor things and those minor things in the past that you can bring up to see with this club and be like, well, there's a little bit of cause of concern there. I think Mike is here. If not, I'll continue going for just a second. But to what you said about the left field situation, we'll talk about Ozuna here for just a quick second. He's back in a situation now, including the series in Milwaukee, where he's almost looking like he did in his April self. He has 3 extra base hits in the month of July. His OPS is back under 800. His average is back under 250, 240 even. He's another candidate to play left field if at all necessary. I don't think you and I want to see that happen, but if emergency were to come to arise, he would be a guy to go out there on a given basis. What are your thoughts on him, being in another slump? I know he was great for this 200 bat sample size, but now that he's back slumping again, what are your causes of concern for him in the left field situation, being the trade deadline is looming?
I think that's definitely a concern. Obviously he's not a good defender, never has been, and it's only gotten worse in his years in Atlanta compared to his days in Miami and St. Louis. Speaking of Miami and St. Louis, wild that the trades they've made with Zach Gallen, Jazz Chisholm, all that kind of stuff. Insane. Anyways, it's a concern for sure. I mean, and Ozuna, obviously he has power, and when it's on, and he was hot for June, and he was hot for some in May, and then July kind of came around, and he's kind of cooled off, which is not ideal, especially again with the 2 injuries to the left fielders, and obviously you mentioned Forrest Wall as well. He's got some game-changing speed, but we haven't seen him hit the major league level at all, really.
Eli White even.
Eli White, okay, that's also true. I mean, and again, obviously, random free agent, insert name here, also could be an option if worse comes to worst. I think that could be a concern just in general. As I mentioned, the injuries and the fact that left field we haven't had this type of we've had this depth for most of the year, and we haven't had this type of hits to the depth consecutively in a long time. Maybe not even the season at all. Besides any position, besides starting pitching, I guess, with Fried and Wright going down, all that kind of stuff. I think just the depth being depleted is a cause for concern. Again, it's the 23rd. We're about 8-9 days from the deadline. There could be a move and play there. We'll have to wait and see for that.
And then, Micah, do you have anything you want to, now that your dog's finally under situation? What were your original reactions to, how that 2-4 Braves homestand out of the break played out?
I mean, I didn't get to watch a lot of games, but the ones I got to see, it was like I was telling you on the phone the other day, it was a whole bunch. Nothing was going our way from the pitching and then when we had the bats going, the pitching wasn't going then. The pitching wasn't going at the same time as the bats, and it was, like I said, nothing was going our way. So I hope they, pick it back up and, keep stay at the top of the MLB.
So I guess that'll move into our first subtopic of tonight, including with the Braves. This player has not been dealing with an injury. He did end up pitching today. Looked a lot better than his last couple of starts. We knew the regression was coming. I'm going to bring up the elephant in the room. What has been wrong with Bryce Elder in the month of July? He's had 1 good start until today. He's had 3 bad starts. It looks like the computer is starting to finally catch up with him, and it's at a bad time, being that 6 other Braves arms are currently on the injured list. We'll get to them in a minute or two. I'll start with you, Micah. What have you seen differently from Bryce Elder that makes you a little worried?
I mean, I think obviously, yeah, you said what's wrong with him as
This
the main question. The peripherals obviously have not supported him all year. There's been times that every start, basically, people say it's wild that he's getting out of this situation, because he's allowing more runners on base. He's allowing more, he's getting higher pitch counts. He's getting into, more difficult situations. His ground ball success has been pretty good. In the last, 2 or 3 starts, I believe 2, there has not been the same Bryce Elder that we saw in the first few months. And that could be, we don't know what that's attributed to. I mean, peripherals obviously, again, haven't supported him, but he was outperforming all of them basically throughout the first few months. And this could just be him running into some bad locations for a few spots at a time. I mean, it's All-Star break hangover, that kind of thing, as well as what you're saying about the NLDS with the week off. Maybe it just kind of affects him. He's trying to get back in a rhythm. We don't really know yet.
I think one thing that came up on the Braves telecast today is they showed something along the lines of before the month of July, he had like a 56% whiff rate, like a 5% hard percentage rate. And in his starts in July, the hard percentage rate is up into the 40s. The whiff rate is down into the low 20s, early, the high teens. And that's a big change for a ground ball pitcher. The analytics aren't going to like you, but if you're a ground ball pitcher, a sinker baller as he is, you got to keep the ball down. You got to be able to play the Braves Gold Glove defense behind you, which a lot of them are former Gold Glovers. I think you can say this year the Braves defense has not been as airtight as it has been in the previous couple, but it's still been very solid. And Ron Washington puts a lot of pride into this, daily with these guys. There's a reason that pitchers like Tim Hudson and Bryce Elder, who aren't great on any analytic scale, have a chance of success in this organization. That's because of the defense this Braves infield always puts out behind these guys. I was a lot more concerned going into his start today, but being he went 6 innings, 2 runs, we'll cover it in just a little bit longer. I need to see him do it once again, and I feel like if he does end up having another quality start, another start where he gives the chance Braves an opportunity to win going into the month of August, I think he's fine. It could just been a type of thing where Charlie Morton, I think, had a rough month of May, but he's been great pretty much the rest of the year. Soroka's 5 starts. He's been good in 3 of them. It's these guys are not, Elder has not been a major league pitcher until this season for a reason. I think he's going through a little bit of a valley. And I think, as I said, if he finds a way to do what he did again today, as of July 23rd against the Brewers, again later this week, before the month of August, I think it's safe to say that he's probably figured something out once again. Micah, what are your main concerns about Bryce Elder from what you saw from the first half compared to now?
Really, I think it's like Dylan said, it's the All-Star hangover. I think he'll be able to pick it back up. I'm not really too concerned as right now, but it is something to be concerned about as of right now. But I think he'll pick it back up.
He's certainly got some good momentum going. After you were saying late today, he had a good start. He's getting some much needed, hopefully, good momentum, good, kind of feeling about, okay, my mechanics are better, I'm getting my spots better, all that kind of stuff, getting the better results that I want, even when, again, the numbers might not show that he's getting, the best ERA in the National League that he had for a minute. He's not getting those kind of results, but he's, kind of, again, today, kind of leaning back towards those to see if, and hopefully he can keep it going through his next few starts and then pick it up for the stretch run.
So let's talk about another Braves arm who had a rehab start just the other night in Lawrenceville, Swanee. It's Max Fried, of course. He's been hurt since the May start against the Orioles. It's amazing that this Braves club has done what they have done this year without Kyle Wright and Max Fried really even being a part of this team at all. Soroka coming back and hasn't really been himself at all yet. Those are 3 guys that were top prospects and had ace potential for us over the last couple of years. They've never been together and healthy, which is crazy to think about. Even Ian Anderson could be in that type of conversation with his Tommy John recovery. But to speak on Max Fried specifically, he's had 3 rehab starts now, 2 in Gwinnett, 1 in Rome. It looks like he might be making 1 at max, 2 more before getting the call back to the majors. Probably that second week of August. It's like making a trade without making a trade, as Chip Caray would like to say. I'll start with you, Micah. How excited would you be for this Braves team to get Max Fried back, being how little depth the bullpen has had the last couple of weeks, combining that with all the rookies just having to constantly come up and go in the cycle between Gwinnett and Atlanta. How much would Max Fried just being a staple back in this rotation help this team down the stretch?
That'd be huge. Look at how far this how good this team has been without Fried so far. It's just, it'd be scary to get him back with the position the team is already in, and if he's at 100%, this team is only getting better. And like you said, it's like a trade without making a trade, adding a talent like him back to the team.
I agree with what both of you said. As far as his rehab starts that are coming up and that have passed, he's had some good ones. I believe his pitch count or pitch limit was supposed to be 60 pitches / 5 innings for the Thursday game against the Norfolk Tides, and unfortunately that game got rained out and postponed, so he had to get pushed back, and now he's starting pretty soon for his next Gwinnett rehab start. I just think that obviously I agree with all of you of what you said about obviously adding him to the team is the whole Chip Carey saying about a trade without a trade, and it'll definitely be valuable. But I think that the question was about concerns. That could be a cause of concern just because he was ready to pitch that day. He's kind of getting pushed back a little bit, shift around just a little bit, just a few days off, which can be a mess up in rhythm or in preparation, that kind of thing. So I'm just hoping he can,
creatures of habit, yeah.
Definitely. I'm just hoping he can show what he had shown in the first few, which was, I believe, he threw 3 no-hit innings in one of his rehab starts, I believe, number 2 or number 3. I'm hoping he can just show that in his next one out, and then, maybe 1 or 2 more after this next one, and then come back up and get to the swing of things. Again, like, obviously they won't. Sometimes they have a pitch limit, sometimes they don't for when a guy's coming back up from the minors from a rehab start. But I hope they kind of just ease him in a little bit, and then once late August comes around, he's in back in full swing, and he can be a big part of the September-October push.
And I think the timing of us getting him back is great because in his career, Max Fried is pretty much immaculate in the month of August. It's his best month in his career. It has been pretty much since his rookie season. And being that you're getting back at the beginning of August, he still gets 2 months to straighten out. So he's not coming back and having to get forced right back into the playoff rotation like a potential Kyle Wright situation will be maybe another month and change from now. But he gets probably 7, 8, 9 starts before the actual playoffs get going to get healthy, be set. But I think it's also perfect because he's going to be fresh, only having 10 starts in the back half of the second half. He's going to be fresher than most arms come playoff time. And I really, truly believe that Max Fried is a borderline top 10 starter in this league, if not a top 10 starter in this league. He is a huge reason of the Braves winning 5 straight division titles, including a World Series. And this team wouldn't be where it was without his rise and, him living up to his prospect potential. But as you said, Dylan, him being pushed back a couple of days in the Norfolk start, he didn't look great on Saturday afternoon. I'm pretty sure he went 5 innings, gave up 3. Now, I will say the Norfolk offense is one of the best AAA offenses in the league, being that the Orioles have a very stacked farm system still to this day. They're kind of like where the 2018-19 Braves are, where they just have gems just ready to be pulled out every couple of weeks. And he went through a pretty stacked lineup down in Norfolk, but I still would like to see that pitch count get up a little bit better. The walks are down. The hard hitting is down. It's just the mechanical issues, and maybe Grissom at shortstop doesn't help him at all down there. But, another start or 2, he should be fine. And I think that this team could need him back in any big way possible. Micah, any further thoughts on this?
No, I just agree with everything y'all saying. Like, yeah, like y'all said, it could be a concern that he didn't get to pitch that one day that got pushed back. But I have faith that he'll be ready when he gets called back up.
Norfolk is leading the entire AAA in record right now. They're a very good team, especially you're mentioning Baltimore. Heston Kjerstad is very talented. Obviously, they have a bunch of other guys that are, not maybe as highly touted or as highly name regarded, compared to Kjerstad, but they have a lot of good guys that have been successful in minors, and some guys that have been successful in majors as well, and some guys that are looking to be future successful major leaguers. So I mean, it's not the end of the world that he didn't have the most clean start, this past weekend against Norfolk, but it's encouraging that at least he's getting it up, and I think that it's just that's the most important part.
So Let's speak on the rest of the injuries. And of course, we talked about Kyle Wright. We talked about Max Fried. Let's talk about these bullpen injuries for just a second. Well, we'll get back into the Rosario Hilliard issues as well, if at all necessary. But we'll start with the bullpen, right? The Braves bullpen clearly hasn't been as good as it was supposed to be this year. I don't want to put any blame on AA. I know there's a lot of casual Braves fans out there saying that Alex Anthopoulos did a terrible job putting this bullpen together. The guy can't predict all these things. I think he did a great job this offseason trying to keep as much depth as possible, even, getting guys off the waiver wire, taking people from the Rule 5, picking up every club option possible. The bullpen on paper going into the season at AAA and in the major league level was great. That's all Alex Anthopoulos can do. That's all he can do in that current moment. I do think that they will end up making some moves here at the trade deadline and picking up a move or two, just like they did in 2019, 2020, etc. But just to speak on all the fans complaining to a degree that Alex Anthopoulos did a terrible job with the bullpen, just stop talking about baseball if that's the case, if that's what you truly think. Because he cannot plan for Nick Anderson, Dylan Lee, Jesse Chavez, and AJ Minter all to be on the injured list coming out of the All-Star break with a bullpen that has already regressed to form. I think we all can agree. Kirby Yates has regressed from his 2022 season. Colin McHugh has regressed from his 2022 form. So has Joey Menace. And those three guys were supposed to be anchors to this team. Combine that with both of your lefties, Dylan Lee and AJ Minter. AJ Minter has not had an AJ Minter type season. Dylan Lee was great, had dead arm. Jesse Chavez was pitching great, got hit off the leg. So a lot of these things, AA can't plan for. Granted, they've had to bring in Pudge's son. They brought in a couple Gwinnett relievers here and there to eat innings. Heck, even like Ben Heller and Michael Tonkin have just been off the street pitching for this club for months now. Who would have expected that? Even Nick Anderson, he had a career renaissance this year. I know he had a little bit of a month, a June that was a little bit more shaky, but he was great in the 7th or 8th inning the entire season before the injury. And I'm not so sure we're going to get him back this year or not, which sucks for him and his career. But for the fans that are complaining about Alex Anthopoulos not doing anything, he did all he could in the offseason. He's going to make moves in this next week to try to help this team as much as possible. But you talk about all these bullpen injuries, combine that with Max Fried and Kyle Wright being on the injured list pretty much the entire time. Soroka's still being up and down. They have not helped one another. They have not helped one another out. The bullpen carousel and the starting rotation carousel, they are two things that do not mix. It's like oil and water. And that is why this team's pitching has not been up to par out of the break. I've talked for a minute. I'm going to go to you first, Dylan, on anything else you want to add, any rebuttals. Just the floor is yours.
No, absolutely. The obviously the bullpen injuries are very concerning, as you mentioned. Chavez is mainly the one I would think of most, just because he's been out for it wasn't an arm related thing. It wasn't anything to do with like fatigue or anything like that. It was it was a hard ground ball off his leg, and I personally, when I was 11, pitched, got hit in the shin, couldn't pitch the next week. Exactly, it hurts. So I mean, it's definitely a cause of concern, especially Nick Anderson as well. You mentioned he was having a really good year. Besides, a little bit of the time coming off just a bunch of injuries. He had some successful seasons in the past. He had a really good season with the Rays in 2020, I believe. Obviously it was a good signing, just like at low risk, high reward. And he was providing that high reward for most of the season until the injury. And Tonkin's been all right. He's been an innings eater. Heller, more recent, same kind of thing. He just hasn't been like reliable, which you don't expect those guys to be. That's like the Josh Tomlin kind of role from a few years ago. You just don't expect those guys to be anything too reliable. It's just they're just there, not to toss any shade their way, but it's just who they are as long relievers that kind of just come up and mop up innings. And as far as the rest of the guys, especially the lefties, that's a big time thing. I've seen a lot of discourse on Twitter about that. About wanting to trade for somebody, but maybe it's not possible. We'll see. Blake, you also mentioned Jackson Stephens. You touch on that real quick.
There's nothing really storyline related to Jackson Stephens. He's just been in Gwinnett most of the year. He's been in the Braves organization. He's been in Rome for rehab. He's been in Gwinnett. He's been fine, but he's just another guy over the years that's just been a local guy that has just come in and by local guy I mean Braves country kid that's just come in and mopped up innings like he was last year. Roll Tide, am I right?
He was more reliable than I feel like a lot of these other mop-up guys have been, especially, last year he was solid down some of the later months of the season. He was making some good pitches and some good bad spots, getting out of tough jams and stuff like that. He was a valuable part. I mean, and yeah, you're saying that nothing storyline related. It's just that he hasn't been with the team for a minute as well. And it's tough to see again coming into the season. The depth was there, and now it's heavily depleted and people are underperforming. And starting pitching a few, we mentioned Elder earlier, slightly regressing back to the norm. And some guys aren't back yet. It's not looking too great for the pitching, but we have 2 months before the playoffs start, so hopefully we can get some guys back up to speed and get back to full strength like we expect it to be at this point.
And then Micah, like what injury out of the bullpen, of course, being Nick Anderson, Dylan Lee, AJ Minter, Jesse Chavez, like out of those four, where are the list of concerns for you?
I mean, like I'm personally still learning, but I know Jesse Chavez is a big one for us, and if is he expected to be back?
Yeah, he's probably more of like a mid-August. He's probably 2 or 3 weeks away from being on the major league team. Probably same thing with Dylan Lee. I think Nick Anderson and Nick Anderson's probably about a Kyle Wright type timeline, but I could see a world where Dylan Lee, AJ, and Jesse are probably all back within the first 2.5 weeks of August.
Yeah, so with us being getting Freed back, getting those bullpen guys and Chavez and Lee back, it's rounding out the pitching game, and that's going to be huge for this team with the offense you already have and getting back the pitching that AA needed to have. That'd be huge for the team, and it's needed.
So let's see. We'll talk about the trade deadline here in just a second, but I do want to go into the lefty reliever conversation, but I feel like we've covered most of the stuff regarding the injuries. Let's talk about the left field, kind of what Dylan was hinting at about 20 minutes ago at this point. With Eddie having the hamstring tightness, he's come back. He only was out like a day or two, but he has not been himself since being put back in the lineup. Hilliard hasn't really had many chances to start since the month of April, when we got Ozuna rolling again, and when we got everybody helped when we got Michael Harris back for center field duties. Hilliard has kind of just been put to this ninth inning base stealing, left field glove role. Both of them, as you said, Dylan, went down in the 2-day period. And with Ozuna regressing back to the mean slowly and scarily, do you think if there was a position that the Braves would want to add at the deadline, it would be a corner outfield spot?
I think it would have to be, honestly. You could look at, obviously, catcher, obviously great. The only other position I can think of besides left field, I mean, you could add some depth with Arcia, because he hasn't been amazing. He hasn't been bad, but his defense is great, and everyone likes him. But his offense hasn't been as good as it was in the first half. Again, maybe some all-star breaks, hangover, that kind of thing. He hasn't been bad. He just hasn't been, what we saw earlier in the year. Left field would have to be the number one for sure, and it's again not a massive concern, but I feel like position player at left field, there's always guys that are valuable out there that you can get, that have a bat, that have some kind of a glove, some kind of a bat that could be any upgrade over. Well, first of all, be healthy, but even past that, any upgrade over the everyday defense of Ozuna or the everyday bat of Hilliard or that kind of thing. Maybe the inconsistencies of Rosario and left as well. There's always Benintendi, I feel like, was in rumors for years. I don't, obviously I'm not saying get him or anything like that, but just in general, I feel like those type of guys are always on the market, and I feel like we have pieces to get somebody that's like that, in that caliber, that they can come in and make a difference. That's not gonna break the bank or anything like that from a prospect side of things.
And to speak on Eddie, he has been miles better than the Eddie Rosario of last year, dealing with the Stevie Wonder, couldn't see. He is, for the most part of the year, he has had an 800 plus OPS. He's had a 260, 255 batting average. He's slugged the ball better than he has in most of his years in Minneapolis. And he has been He hasn't been that NLCS hero, but we're not expecting the dude to hit 600. But he has been a much better defender this year. He has been a much better average hitter this year. He has been able to see the ball. The walks probably still aren't where we would like them to be, but like when the Braves offense was going at its best just a couple weeks ago, we had 11 guys that were absolutely mashing. Of course, everybody in the starting lineup, including Ozuna at the DH position. But anytime Pilar or Travis would step on the field, you know that they were going to make an impact too. The only two guys were either Culberson, who's just the cheerleader, he's the 26th man, he's just happy to be here, and Hilliard, he would come in, steal a base, catch a ball in the bottom of the ninth inning. The other 11 position players mashed. They were all hot at the same time, and that's why the Braves were able to overcome the pitching injuries and even the bullpen issues from the month of June compared to where they were in the month of May, where they did struggle against some of the better teams. I know that every team has dealt with the same amount of injuries this year. The pitch clock has really been an issue for pitchers, and I understand that. It's a first-year thing. It's a lot different for them. I'm hoping over the next couple of years, the injury amount starts to kind of trickle back down to a better mean and a better regressing point. But we've dealt with injuries a lot this year, and I hope that once we get these guys healthy, that's the end of it, and it's not another cycle in the month of September of just everybody constantly being hurt. Micah, any other things you'd like to add regarding, maybe Rosario and Hilliard's injury, or even Ozuna's regressing performance? I can't speak for whatever reason.
I mean, y'all really touched on everything. With about the trade deadline. Like me, you talked about on the last episode, with Free not being under contract, under our control next year, it wouldn't be bad to, if one's available at a good price, to find a starting pitcher or somebody to help in the bullpen. It wouldn't be bad for us to go in that direction. So that's personally what I would look at.
I think also coming with that territory of, looking for pitching help comes with obviously parting with some major league guys, maybe, as well as some prospects. We have the prospects. Our farm system isn't ranked the best, and it hasn't been for years because we've had so many guys graduate. But also, you saw last year, the worst farm system in LD, and Harrison Strider get up 1-2 in the rookie of the year. So it's not all about the rankings, obviously, and what Keith Law says or anything like that from Baseball America, or at the Athletic or anything like that. It's we have the depth to get. Not anyone insane, but we have the prospects. We have some guys that we could trade to get some difference makers that are, at the very least, back end of the rotation, or early reliever, just something that can kind of just hold it down in moments that are not. We don't currently have guys that are able to succeed in those moments at the moment because of the injuries and because of the regression, and even if you want to have a lineup as well, we can get some difference makers. So I think that going down that route to get starting pitcher as well, Mike, as you said, could be very viable, and we got about a week to figure that out. So hopefully some good performances from some guys in the minors if they're trying to trade those guys to try to get their stock up a little bit, and then see what moves can be done at the deadline.
And so, yeah, Dylan, I think you made up a great point here. You didn't make it up. You're speaking the truth in the fact that the Braves farm system isn't anywhere as bad as what some of the national outlets are saying. Like, as you said, we had the worst ranked system out of the entire league last year. I mean, we had at least 4 prospects just come up and break out for us. Of course, the big names were Strider and Harris, but like Grissom came up, played a huge impact. Kyle Muller and Bryce Elder down the stretch, they were much better than the Jake Odorizzi's of the world, helping us secure the NL East title over the Mets. And for your farm system being number 30, that says a lot. I think also the Braves just truly don't care about the farm system ranking as much as other organizations do. Like Jared Schuster going into the season could have been ranked in the top 30 prospects in the major leagues. He's still a first-round pick out of Wake Forest. He didn't quite get himself together this year. I still have high hopes for the guy in the future. And I really think this farm system is still, a couple pieces away from being in another cycle. That's why you saw pieces like Drew Waters being moved for compensation picks last year. In the words of like Alex Anthopoulos, just exchanging one prospect for another, one that can help the team in the future rather than just being a blocked spot. But yeah, I think this team has a little bit more of an asset than when people are saying, come the national media wise, and we'll be interested to see what pieces are parted with in the deadline. We'll get to the deadline talk in just a second. First, we'll just give a very quick rundown of I can't speak. I'm so sorry to the viewers of what happened in the series in Milwaukee this weekend. Braves going on to take 2 of 3, winning the Friday and Sunday matchups, finding a way to barely lose on Saturday night, almost a sweep. In the process, it improves the Braves' record to 4-5 out of the break. Of course, the winning pitchers being Soroka, pitched well enough to get the win Friday night. Bryce Elder didn't get the win today, but he was the starter and looked much better than his previous July starts. Wasn't the greatest of nights for Ryan Inns in his debut. Got sent back down in the spot start on Saturday night. Devin Williams was just able to get out alive against Ozzy Albies on national television. But I'll start with you, Micah, so far. Did you like what you saw out of the Braves more this weekend compared to what you saw at Truist last week?
You know, the pitching was better last week than it nearly as we did. We still got problems with the bats where they should be with the talent, but they're getting back in rhythm, and we're getting closer to the team. We hopefully get back to that team we was before the break, or even better.
And then Dylan, any takeaways from this weekend or anything on particular Saturday night that you think was the difference between the Braves getting the sweep and just winning the series?
I was going to mention the Friday and Sunday games that I kind of pay attention to most as well. But, Saturday, obviously that game came down to the line. Obviously, Ozzy struck out swinging with some guys on base. We had some chances as well, and then the top of the ninth to continue that game. I want to talk about today's game as well. Daysbel Hernandez made his debut. He shut it down. Very, very good debut for him. He's been in the minors for a little bit, having some good success, and it's good to see him come up and continue to improve the team. Obviously, it's not on the level of Harrison Strider, just like guys that are not as insanely regarded coming up and being great, but they play center. One plays center, one's a starter. These relievers are kind of under the radar as prospects a lot of the time. Even that's why some guys get drafted pretty highly as relievers, because they can become high impact relievers in the future, which is very valuable as well on any team. And even why some starters turn into relievers, again, because stamina and everything like that, being able to extend yourself over the long period of a season as well for value of the team is great. And so Daysbel Hernandez came up. That was a great debut for him. I'm glad he was able to get that win today. He was the one who got the win, as Blake mentioned. Bryce pitched well, didn't get the win, but Daysbel came in and shut it down. And so that was a good thing to see, as well as just the offense didn't go 13-run crazy like they did against the Diamondbacks, or they didn't go completely shut out or anything like they have not recently, but they've done it a few times this season. They scored enough to win, and obviously the game they lost, they were right there. So I feel like it's, especially today, being come from behind as well. It's a nice feeling to come out of that with 3 at least. We can't be greedy and want to sweep every time. And now you mentioned the Boston series coming up. That'll be a big one, because I know that we have a homestand coming up pretty soon after that. So it's that'll be right around the trade deadline as well. We'll be seeing the Angels on trade deadline, day or a few days around that area. So we'll see if Shohei is still there or anything like that. So it'll be good for the Boston series. I know Boston's not the greatest this year, but they're in a pretty good division as well. They need to Braves need to take care of business and then continue it rolling to see really where this team's at for the last, again, 4, 5 days before the deadline, and then reevaluate as results keep coming in, basically.
And speaking of Boston, they just finished off a Sunday night baseball victory over the New York Metropolitans. I think they won that series. So they're going into Tuesday's night game as the same as the Braves, victorious. But Dylan, you brought up a fact that, I think a lot of people look at the Brewers as like the Rays of the National League. They are very much a pitching laboratory. They know how to turn good pitchers into elite pitchers, trash cans into solid pitchers. They know how to turn prospects into top aces and everything of those sorts. And you saw that this weekend. Like, the Brewers had, until Ozzy Albies, of course, with the game-winning home run tonight, had a 30-inning stretch of scoreless baseball. There was a reason they were able to trade Josh Hader a year ago and be willing to do that with guys like Devin Williams waiting in the wings. Joe Payamps has been great in the 3-team trade, of course, that included Esther Ruiz, Sean Murphy, William Contreras, everybody of that sorts. That was another great addition for them. But to speak on the Braves bullpen, like, I know we discussed all the injuries and that's all been discussed, but the innings they had this weekend, if you look in the box score, they were great. There was many innings where the Braves bullpen struck out the side. Kirby Yates had an inning where he struck out the side in a close. Iglesias struck out the side today, looking very fresh on a Sunday afternoon. Joe Jimenez struck out the side. Ben Heller struck out the side. They each had great innings. But during those strikeouts, every inning was high stress. You get guys up 0-2, you couldn't put them away. A lot of base hits, a lot of leadoff walks. And I think that is ultimately the reason the Brewers were able to squeeze out Game 2 of the series, being able to just play enough off these Braves mishaps. And that's something that will definitely be straightened out with more bullpen additions. I know that they're doing all they can right now. And I'll take striking out the side and the aftermath, but in the moment, it's a lot of frustration and a lot of stress, especially as an Atlanta sports fan, watching your bullpen just constantly like guys on base just to strike them out. But you can't, beggars can't be choosers. Am I right? I don't know if Mike is currently here at the moment, so we'll move on to the next topic, which is our second to last topic on the night for the Braves at least, and that's the Yonny Chirinos pickup from the Tampa Bay Rays this afternoon. Another organization that if you can pick somebody up from their organization, usually you're doing something right if you can find something in them. And they did send down Soroka. I don't think it's what I originally thought a couple hours ago. I was like, oh, well, he's probably on the last leg of his chances being as a free agent after 2024. You look at the Braves' upcoming schedule, they don't need a 5-starter for another week or two. I think they're going to go down there, keep him on his basic schedule in Gwinnett, allow him to continue working on his mechanics. I will say he's looked a little bit more flat since coming back injury-wise. He's changed his whole mechanics. His sinker ball has been a little higher. But I like the Yonny Chirinos pickup. I think that's something really great for the Braves. It's almost like a pre-deadline acquisition from another great team. And I hope that he's able to eat some innings for us and maybe even be activated tomorrow. What do you know about Yonny from his playing day so far, Dylan?
He's been, obviously you mentioned this year, he's been all right. Obviously ERA is not everything, but ERA is in the mid 4s, which is again not ideal, but it's not awful for a reliever that's had some actual. Right, very true. That's had some some tough situations that he's been in. He's not a bad pitcher or anything like that. He's getting in situations where there needs to be someone that's in there to shut it down and continue the game. And that's why, again, what I was saying, just the relievers get so valuable and also overlooked at the same time with prospects and with trades and everything like that. I think he's been solid for most of his career, especially this season. Again, the 4 ERA is not the greatest, but he's shown to be a pitcher that can get you out of tough situations, definitely. And I think, as you were saying, as soon as he can get activated, that would be ideal for the team. Obviously, Soroka got sent down, which isn't what we were, maybe not what we were expecting, but I feel like he had some solid starts, and he, again, it was just the scheduling. It's kind of more important to get Chirinos up pretty soon. So I think the waiver claims have been, again, as you guys are saying, a good pitching factory. Basically, if you're picking up someone from there, usually you expect them to do something pretty decent, as Nick Anderson did from the Rays as well. So I think, Chirinos, whether he's an impact arm or he's just there to help out, I think it's a great addition. About a week before the deadline, just so we can kind of see where we're at a little bit more and just kind of see how the bullpen shakes out with some aforementioned injuries kind of starting to clear up, whether their returns coming imminently or not.
And so we just discussed the Brewers series. Of course, our next series is with the Red Sox. Our next 5 games, pretty much going into the trade deadline, going into that Angel series. We have a 2-gamer in Fenway. Of course, that's our interleague rival per se. That's why we have 2 sets with them every single year. Tuesday, Wednesday night in Fenway, and of course we get the Brewers again next weekend. What are you expecting the Braves to do in those 5? Personally, for me, I'm just hoping we split in Fenway. As you said, the Red Sox aren't as good as they usually are, but being as a 2-gamer, that is a team that's over 500. That is a team that's usually pretty good. That's a team that never really, throws their ring in on the season. I'm just hoping we can find a way to get out of Fenway with a split. I could see the Braves sweeping, but I'm expecting a split realistically. I'd love just being able to take 2 or 3 from the Brewers once again next weekend. You'll probably see some very similar pitching matchups, and if that's the case, that means the Braves took 4 or 6 from another first place club. And as of right now, they have handled Cincinnati in that division. So as of right now, it looks like the Brewers are in a very good place to take back their crown, which they have owned the Central the last couple of years. Dylan, what are your thoughts on what the Braves will do going into the Angel series?
You said it exactly. I'm looking for, a split in Boston. I know obviously Boston's, obviously a tough team. They got the pesky pole, very pesky team as well. Just, they got some guys over there that are obviously, again, they're not performing as well as they'd like to be, but they're still a good team. They're again in the division. The division is tough, but they're a pretty good team. As well as, you said Milwaukee as well. Taking 2 or 3 again from them would be a nice 4 out of 6 to in this week and a half span basically of playing Milwaukee, and that would be important. I mean, obviously, as you said, much earlier, that the Braves will be a top 2 seed. You would unless something catastrophic happens, the NL Central winner will not overtake them. The Dodgers or Padres or anything, or Diamondbacks even, NL West winner could, but NL Central, you don't expect them to. That could be important just in case it comes into play, or whether it comes into play even with, maybe not the tiebreaker, but maybe just the wins and loss record between them and another wildcard team. That could be, the difference between facing them or whoever wins that series in the second round, that kind of thing. So I feel like that's just Milwaukee is a tough team as well. They always have good pitching. They have timely hitting as well. They got some guys like Southfield had a crazy debut. So I feel like it's an important week, obviously, and then trade deadline. But just as far as results on the field go, 3 out of 5 would be I would be perfectly fine with it, as well as what you mentioned. And then going into the Angels series, which starts August, and then that starts the kind of stretch run when some guys are coming back, like Freeze coming back pretty soon after that, and then hopefully get Chavez and some other guys back. So, just getting momentum into that little cycle that picks up around August.
And it's crazy because this is another year we're not going to face Mike Trout. We have not faced Mike Trout since summer of 2014. We played a 3-gamer, I want to say, in mid-June against them, 2014, the year the Braves crashed and burned, started the rebuild later that fall. But we faced them, I want to say, the year in 2017. He had an Achilles issue. Freddie Freeman had a hamstring issue going into that weekend. They didn't face one another. So the 2 stars that were on display in 2017 didn't face one another. 2020, we were supposed to play them 4th of July. COVID happens. This last year, he dealt with injuries for a lot of the season, and same thing with 21. The dude is, really not being able to stay healthy anymore, which sucks because this is finally a year where the Angels are an over 500 club. I feel like they'd be still 6, 7, or 8 games over if Trout was healthy, but they've kind of come back down towards the middle of the pack, towards the Seattles of the world in their division, and they're like 4 out of the wild card spot right now. But the big question looming is, will the Angels trade Shohei? I don't think so. I think even if they should, Arnie Moreno won't. I think they'll probably just end up letting him walk. And I think he's going to end up being a Dodger. I don't think he wants to go to the West or the East Coast. I don't think that means he's going to be a Met or a Yankee either. But that's a conversation for another episode. So our last Brave segment, perfect timing because Micah's back. Then we'll finally get into the Hawks, which I know is what Micah really wants to talk about. Not a lot of news on the Falcons or United front. So sorry for the episode being a bulk of the Braves for the non-baseball listeners. We're happy if you stuck with us. The last topic tonight, of course, being the trade deadline, is within the next week. What are some names and some type of organizations you want to poach to add to this team and get their final pieces for hopefully this second ring in 3 years? I'll start with you, Micah, since you're back.
Well, like I said earlier, I'm still learning, so I don't know many names, but the name that you mentioned in the last episode was Dylan Cease. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I did mention him. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a player against the Braves Sunday during that homestand.
Yeah. So, like, you sold me on him. So that'd be a type of player I would want that I can name at least.
See, the Dylan Cease discussion is interesting because you'd have to throw everything in. If you were to get Dylan Cease, being that he is another ace that'd be under control for a couple of years, you wouldn't have to pay him. I think that'd be a trade where you'd have to throw away. If you were to get Dylan Cease and let's say somebody else from the White Sox organization who you would really like, that trade would probably have to include Vaughn Grissom and Michael Soroka. And that'd be a conversation for another day. I don't know if the Braves are willing to do that. They've been an organization that has not done that, unless it's been a void of like Matt Olson filling Freddie Freeman. It's just the Braves aren't the type of team to give up so much for things that are outside of the organization, specifically in trading terms. But I think I'm more focused on. So let me put it this way before I get your thoughts, Dylan. I think the Braves will get 2 relievers. I would like them to get a rental lefty, someone who's on a contract year. Whether that's Josh Hader or not, I don't know. But I'd like them to get a lefty who's on a contract year, being that Dylan Lee has had the dead arm. You don't know if he's going to have any setbacks. AJ Minter has not been himself this year. He's a free agent after 2024, so you don't really have to worry about it yet. I would love to get a rental lefty just to help out Dylan Lee and AJ Minter in that factor, because I really don't trust Lucas Leckie and the Danny Youngs of the world for forever much more. And the other reliever, I'd like them to get another Raisel Iglesias type of addition, and that's another high Ks per 9 righty. I don't know if he's going to move into closer or not. I think Raisel Iglesias has been a lead at home this year. I think on the road, especially in the warmer, the not so warm weather, which maybe is a little cause of concern because it's not going to be 90 degrees pitching in the month of October, at least not in the later rounds. We still have some hot days in the month of October in Georgia, but that second reliever, I want it to be a high strikeouts per 9 righty. I don't know if he's going to be a contract player or not, but that might be one where you have to throw a little bit more in to the situation. Maybe a Dylan Dodd or somebody of that sort. Maybe Shoemake is in a deal to try to get somebody else, being that you have other shortstops in the system behind Grissom now. So those would be the type of relievers I'm looking for, but I do also expect them to add a starter because you go into a playoff series, right? You really only need 4 guys. 5 is great. But if you have 4, you're usually fine. The Braves won it in 2021 with 3. Their 4th starter was like Drew Smiley made 1 start. Ynoa made 1 start. It was pretty much just Ian, Charlie, and Max, right? Now that there's 4 rounds, being that there's a wild card series involved, you'd like to have 4. And I trust Charlie Morton come playoff time. That's what we paid him for. That's what the Rays paid him for. That's what the Astros have paid him for. That's how he turned his career around. He's a big playoff pitcher. I feel like Snitker has maybe pushed him a little too far in a couple of his outings, and that's why his stats aren't as good as they should be. I trust him when it matters. I don't think he's going to be throwing 94 down the middle this time, coming off a month of oblique injury. Dylan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Max Fried, he's going to have 2 months to get back. If he doesn't have any setbacks, that's 3 guys I'm fine with. Then you're really hoping that Elder or Soroka down the stretch just prove themselves. But if they don't, that's why I'd be willing to add a rental starter. And the 2 names I'm specifically thinking of are Jordan Flaherty of the St. Louis Cardinals and Lucas Giolito, Max's high school teammate from the Chicago White Sox. And those are the 2 teams that I'm looking at to poach, pretty much the most, because I feel like you can get the most done with the least amount of deals, and that's the most realistic thing. I put a poll on Twitter last week for both things. The White Sox bullpen, the Cardinals bullpen. People with about 80 votes or so would rather poach the White Sox bullpen. Simultaneously, people said they'd rather have Jordan Montgomery, who is a lefty on a contract year. I think it'd be great to add him, being that Max Fried is your only lefty going into the playoffs. I'd like to have a second lefty, and he could be that guy. But I also could see the conversation for Giolito. I think the White Sox bullpen is a better shopping ground for us. I would love to add a Kendall Graveman, a Joe Kelly. A Garrett Crochet might cost a little bit to get, but that could be your lefty right there. So those are the type of teams I'm really looking at specifically. To wrap it back up, I want a rental lefty. I want a high strikeout righty. I don't know if he'll be on a contract year or not, but I think we need at least 2 bullpen arms. And I'd love to add a rental starter, whether that's JP Sears, whether that's Lucas Giolito, Jordan Montgomery. That's the type of moves we could see. If we get a positional player, I think it's what Dylan said. It's either going to be a left fielder that the move probably won't make sense the day it happens, but in a year or 2, we'll be like, okay, I can see what AA was thinking here. He's a couple steps ahead of everybody. So that's what I'm looking for. Dylan, what about you?
Those are some of the guys, not necessarily the names, but I feel like the positions or specific type of that is what we need. And obviously, I think, Michael, you mentioned Dylan Cease that Blake had told you about earlier. He's a local guy, went to Milton High School. So I mean that's the guy we could look to get. You mentioned Dylan Cease. You also mentioned Lucas Giolito, his teammate. Also Max Fried's former teammate. So another connection there. I think that those guys would be good. Obviously, for one starter, Cease is going to cost a lot. He will. He is good. He hasn't been the most consistent over the course of the entire year, but he is a good starting pitcher and has a lot left in the tank. So I think that would be the big splash.
I do think he would improve mightily with us, though.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. Especially with, again, you mentioned just the defense, not even mentioning any other factors. Our defense isn't as good as it's been in previous years, but our defense still has a lot of guys on it that are very good. Riley has been improving. The stats might not still show it, but Riley has been improving defensively. Arcia is, he's good out there. He's reliable. Olson, he's a first baseman. His defense hasn't been great. His stats definitely don't say he's been good, but he's a first baseman. I feel like that's not all the concern in the world towards him. And you mentioned some relievers. I like the high K per 9 righty. Again, not sure if he's a rental or not, like Iglesias. And then we obviously extended him. There's some guys that are out there. I mean, and you can get some guys out there that are not too expensive. My main thing that I want to mention that you already mentioned as well is a lefty. I mean, especially with the injuries to AJ and Dylan, that needs to happen. And whether it's somebody that's big time like Josh Hader, whether it's someone that's kind of middle of the pack that can make an impact. Like I can't think of any names off the top of my head, but some lefty late inning relievers that can come in high leverage moments and be impactful, and that can cost maybe Shoemake, Grissom, any of those guys from AAA or anything like that are blocked at the major league level as well currently, considering Grissom's lackluster defense and bat didn't prove consistent after his hot start to his major league career last season. So I think all of what you both touched on was definitely some guys that we could look after, some position that we could look after, some roles that we can pursue. So I'm just excited to see where we go with this and see how accurate the fans are compared to what AA is thinking, because as we know he's ahead of the game, but we'll see if we can kind of see eye to eye with him as well.
So let's put this all in a picture real quick, right? Before we move on to the Hawks. If what we're saying does come true, let's look at how this team will look at, going into the month of August. We're going to assume that Max Fried is going to be back. I'm not so sure we'll get Nick Anderson or Kyle Wright back, so I'm not really going to put them in this conversation, but we know that we're going to get Dylan Lee, Jesse Chavez, and AJ Minter back probably within the next 3 weeks. Same thing with Max Fried, right? And let's assume that they're going to add this rental lefty, the high strikeout righty, along with Yanni Chirinos now, and this rental starter. You look at the rotation. It's a rotation of Max Fried, Spencer Strider, Bryce Elder, Charlie Morton, and either Mike Soroka or whoever that rental is. That's a really freaking good rotation of healthy. Probably top in the majors, if not top 3. You look at the bullpen, right? I think a lot of the issues, as we said earlier, there's been some regression from some of the older righties, but being that it's been an absolute carousel, combining with the injuries in the starting rotation, everybody's been out of whack. You've had independent ball pitchers pitching in long relief. You've had middle relievers in setup. You've had AJ Minter and Nick Anderson closing, and they're not closers. They're setup guys. Even Iglesias has not been the greatest this year. He's been better at home, and that's why I said I trust him at Truist Park when it matters. But if you look at, let's say they get this lefty, right? All of a sudden, AJ Minter and Dylan Lee have a lot of help, and that helps them finish their season strong. You get another high strikeout righty, it helps out Iglesias a lot in the 8th inning or even 7th inning in some nights. And that would push everybody back. It pushes Kirby Yates back. It pushes Colin McHugh back. It pushes Joe Jimenez, who has been much better since the calendar turned in July, back. That is a huge help for your bullpen. Even Yanni Chirinos in that conversation. And it finally kind of gets rid of some of the dead weight. Like I think when Jesse Chavez comes back, he probably retakes Ben Heller's spot. If Tonkin goes cold or not, we'll see if he ends up being the inning eater. Maybe the Braves just end up moving a guy like Soroka or Bryce Elder who fizzles down the stretch into the bullpen. Hell, there's even a conversation where they could see AJ Smith-Shawver go back to the bullpen at the end of the year and help this team down the stretch. But I do understand the cause of concerns for the bullpen. We watch the games. I'm frustrated too when watching them, but if I do think they make these small moves, Yanni Chirinos, of course, has been the first one, but if you get this high strikeout righty, you get this this rental lefty, that's 3 new arms. Combine that with a couple of guys coming back from injury, that's like 5 new people in your bullpen. That's going to help a lot, and it's going to push the guys back to the role, and I think that this team will be in a much better spot moving forward than they have been pretty much since the second half has started about a week and a half ago. Any final thoughts on the Braves before we move over to the Hawks, guys? I'll take that as a no. All right. So Micah, go Braves. Yeah, hell yeah. We'll give the floor over to Micah for most of these. Sorry for running a little longer tonight, guys. Again, we're still a newer pod. We're learning. We're getting chemistry together as we go. But not a lot of Falcons news tonight, not a lot of Atlanta United news tonight. But so hopefully we'll get done within the next 45 minutes or so, and Michael will trim this down to however long this needs to be before Tuesday night when the Braves play the Red Sox. Maybe you guys are watching it after they win. Who knows? But the first Hawks storyline that came out this week, of course, the Hawks signed veteran guard Wesley Matthews. I'm pretty sure it was close to a 1-year, $2 million deal. It basically is the same amount of money they used to free up Tyrese Martin. Who had a great summer league, but I think a lot of people preferred Seth Lundy over him in the certain roles. I don't really see a conversation of Seth Lundy or Tyrese Martin even helping the Hawks where they're at. Micah and I had a long discussion last episode about what the Hawks need to do, and we talked about Siakam, everything in between. So if you guys didn't catch that, make sure to catch the first episode, and maybe for you as well, Dylan, if you're confused about some of the stuff we're talking about, go back and re-listen afterwards. But Mike, what was your original thoughts to them signing Wesley Matthews, and what does this mean for whether he'll be on the team? Do you think this helps the Pascal movement? Like, just everything that's going through your mind. Tell us.
Well, like I said, when we traded for Patty Mills, it needed veteran on this team. Something we've lacked the past couple of years, and I don't see him getting much playing time, if any at all. I see him with Solomon Hill, Vince Carter type role. If Vince Carter, was on a winning team, he's just a good veteran for this. Keep the locker room together, help them in the rough patches, get them advice, That's the type of guy we need for Trey and DeJounte. And like I said, keeping a chemistry. And with like you said, Tyrese Martin, like a lot of fans didn't like that the Hawks waived him, but a lot of fans got to think about spending money on a guy that's not gonna get much playing time, where he spent much of his time on College Park last year. So it really didn't make sense to have him on a team that's wanting to win now. And with the Wesley Matthews signing, with the Wesley Matthews signing, we signed him and we didn't have an open roster spot. So as you alluded to, it could be a Pascal Siakam trade coming, or another trade with the Hawks signing without an open roster spot. So got to keep our eyes open for what might come, what may come.
Yeah, I know a lot of us didn't like seeing that DeJounte and Trey were still interacting with Clint and DeAndre like best friends this week, because we know that those are guys that could potentially be moved. And the Siakam deal, we'll get to that more in a minute. But Dylan, what was your initial breakdown to everything Micah said, and the original news about Wesley Matthews becoming an Atlanta Hawk?
Obviously, Wesley Matthews has been a bench scorer for a lot of good teams in the past, especially the past 5 years. But he's been a spark plug off the bench, and obviously he's getting older now. And you're mentioning Micah, just the Vince Carter role, Solomon Hill, anything like that, just being there for some of these younger guys. Not the same position, not the same kind of play style as a guy like Kobe Buffkin, which we're going to get into pretty soon. But that's still a guard that's 15 years older than you, that has a lot of experience in this league with scoring, with being on good teams. That Buffkin's hoping to do both those things this year and in the future, and that's something that can be valuable. And whether it's less on the court than it is, then less on the court and more off the court, then so be it. It's not an expensive contract by any means. It's not like the wrestlers don't have any money. We all know that. It's a sign that makes sense, and whether, as we were saying earlier about like Patty Mills and training for Rudy Gay, anything like that for John Collins, there's a chance he doesn't make the roster. There's also a reason that Tyrese Martin was released, I believe. I'm not sure if we're gonna get into him at all, but B. Krejci, him being kept over Tyrese Martin, I believe, is the right decision. He adds some more facilitation for sure. I think he was a more reliable shooter, even as Tyrese Martin came out of the draft as a very solid shooter. Krejci can be more creative on offense. He has more, I wouldn't say defensive instincts, because Martin is a good defender, but I feel like Krejci he gets to off-ball spots better. Maybe that's a hot take. I'm not sure. But I think that there's definitely some value in the signing. And again, with Buffkin, I guess we can get into that now if we're cool with that. Kobe Buffkin being helped by Wesley Matthews is big time. And we talk about his summer league wasn't what we wanted it to be, But then again, people are calling Trae Young a bust after he had some not great summer league, not great. I should say very bad summer league performances.
A lot worse than Kobe.
And look at him now; he is an elite, heavily worse with much higher expectation. He just didn't look like he knew what he was doing. Bufkin, at least in some capacity, did. I would say also that Trae obviously coming with higher expectations. He's now look at him now, top 5 playmaker, top 10 scorer, everything like that. He's an all NBA caliber talent. Obviously, we're not expecting Bufkin to be that exact same thing because he was coming out of Michigan as an improved prospect from freshman year, sophomore year, not come out as the insane, uber talented All-American freshman point guard that Trae Young was. But just talking about his summer league review wasn't, again, not what we wanted, but there are some things that are encouraging. He had some good hot streaks of whether it be shooting. He also had some good passing as well. Obviously, he is a little bit, I won't say a little bit, he is on the more thinner side for being a point guard. But hey, we have experience with that. Trae Young's on the roster with him. So, and also, just want to mention Bufkin, can be a 1 or a 2. He now in the NBA just can get a little bit bigger, just add some weight, add some muscle, and everything like that. And he's got good passing instincts. He has he has a mid-range jumper that he's got to a lot in college. A lot of people compare his jump shot to D'Angelo Russell type and mechanics. I saw a lot of people mentioning that. There's some stuff to be excited about. I think obviously he didn't show exactly what we wanted him to, but again, summer league is not the indicator. There's been summer league MVPs that don't go on to get the next contract. There's been Trae Youngs who've only become hopefully future MVPs. So, both summer league not great overall, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, and as well as just how the team performed overall.
Micah, you first.
That's with the thing with Bufkin, like you said, he didn't have the best summer league, but at the same time, you seen the player can be, and they said after the first game, he was asking the coaches for film on the other team, and I just see him as a ready and determined player. And you looking back at his college days, where he wasn't a really good player his first year, but the second year he had a huge jump in points, and he just he keeps working, and like he said, that first year in college was the first year that basketball didn't really work out for him. And, he stayed hungry and kept working, and that's always a good player. That's always the type of player that you want to add to your team. And just looking at his performances from game to game as he progressed, you see he didn't get discouraged. He kept shooting the ball even when he was missing. You never see him put his head down. You never see him get down. And even when he was out the game, when he was having a bad game, he was up supporting his teammates, cheering them on, and that's the type of player I want on my team. And I think he'll do some good things on this team in the minutes that he gets, and he has good role models in front of him. Bray, DeJounte, Patty Mills if they keep him, and Wesley Matthews, and Quinn Snyder is a good development for him.
And to speak on the Patty Mills part for a second, we covered it in the last episode. We said that as of right now in July 2023, Rudy Gay and Patty Mills are a shell of what they were in their prime. But Micah and I did dive into that we would rather have Patty Mills over Rudy Gay as of July 2023, being that the Hawks are in more need of a veteran in the room, and the Hawks play the stagger a lot. Trae and DeJounte are going to be on the court for 40 minutes of the game. At least one of them will be. And so really I think Patty Mills is definitely a step up than what Aaron. I don't think he's what DeLon Wright was. DeLon Wright was definitely the best backup guard the Hawks have had, other than the Lou Williams playoff run. I don't think that Patty Mills is that anymore, but I do think that being the veteran, I think he's easily able to get 7 to 10 minutes in a game, keep the offensive flow and do his job. I think I would much rather have him over Rudy Gay as of July 2023. So I would not be mad if at least he started on the roster going into the season. All right. Sorry, guys. If there's a random cut there, StreamYard had a little hiccup. It ended our recording in the process of us talking about Kobe. So sorry if there's a little bit of a choppage in the editing there. Micah and I will try to do our best to make sure it's as smooth as possible. But we're sorry for that little interruption, and we'll continue on. We're talking about, Kobe Buffkin and how he probably is in this Pascal Siakam trade if it were to happen here in this next week or two, because, as I was speaking about before we got cut off a second ago, the Hawks were in a position where they're still talking to the Raptors a good bit, which shows that there is still interest there and that the deal is still a very high likely possibility. But it seems that there's something holding it up, whether it's the Raptors GM being his usual self, whether there's a third team being involved, whether that's Indiana, Dallas, whoever it may be. But I think one of the constant things you can think is that maybe instead of the Hawks giving up AJ, Jalen, or Onyeka, they're willing to part ways with Kobe. And the Raptors are willing to take him, and they're waiting for this signing to be officially tradable, which is, I think, the second week of August, and that's why you're seeing the holdup that is, because I really do think the Hawks do need to get this Pascal Siakam trade done, especially if it is, especially if you are able to ink him to an extension and you're not giving up any of your young guys, not named Kobe Buffkin. Because as of right now, you and I discussed this in the last episode, Micah, the Hawks are still the same team without John Collins at 16 points last year, which, while he has regressed in his time in Atlanta, has come to an end. That's not a better team. I'm not willing to say, let's run this back. We've tried that the last 2 years. It's not worked. I don't care that we have Quinn Snyder and it's not Nate McMillan anymore. It's still the Atlanta Hawks we're talking about. It's still a team that doesn't know how to play over 82 games. It's still a team that superstar doesn't take the regular season seriously enough. And I still need more roster fluctuation. I need either Clint Capella or DeAndre Hunter off this team. I need Pascal Siakam in a Hawks uniform. Or I need more moves before we start the season, because I am still not happy with this team as of right now. But for Kobe, he definitely turned it back on towards the back half of the summer league. I am maybe that's good enough for the Raptors to say, you know what, we'll take him and Grady Dick. And the Hawks are able to get Pascal, and they're able to extend him and Onyeka in the next year, and we're sitting here a lot more happy than we have been with the Hawks the last couple winters, because they have not been a fun watch. But I think that's pretty much everything in regards to Kobe. Micah, was there any other things regarding the Pascal situations and how it relates to Kobe that you want to touch on that you didn't get a chance to previously?
I haven't seen anything other than what you said. Just gotta wait out, probably, because when he signed the contract, we can't trade him for 30 days. So I don't know what when that mark would be, or that deadline would be, but I keep an eye open to whenever that time comes.
And yeah, I'm most willing to trade Kobe over AJ, Jalen, and Onyeka, because I really do think the Hawks do need to find a way to add Pascal Siakam on this team, and maybe the Wesley Matthews signing also goes back to, maybe that means that they're having to give up Saddiq Bey, which, you got to give to get. I get that, especially if you're going to get Saddiq for such a low price. I'm willing to let him get him for the Kevin Huerter Sacramento pick, AJ, and Saddiq, especially if we're able to extend him. Saddiq's on another contract year. I don't want all these players that you're constantly having to pay at the same time, because that's how the Hawks got in their original cap hell space. But I think that's where we're at this current point in time. One more point on the Summer League. Of course, Mohamed Gay was the other second-round center. The Hawks haven't had a second-round pick that's been worth anything since Mike Muscala in 2013. If Onyeka is the guy, and we talked about this off air before the show, we'd like Onyeka to eventually be the starter, whether it's this year. If not fifth year, it has to be, being he's the sixth pick. We'd like to think they're probably going to find some other backup center to play behind Onyeka, at least for this year, if Capella's not on the team. But we would like to see Mohamed Gay turn into this solid backup center. And based on the stuff you guys saw from him in the Summer League, what makes you think, what's his trajectory, and just what did you like? I know the first game, it looks like Giannis Antetokounmpo out there hooping wise. I'll start with you, Dylan.
His mobility stood out to me most, obviously. I mean, I know that people have been talking about him coming out of Washington State being inexperienced at this whole game that we call basketball. He played well enough at Washington State to turn himself into an early second-round pick. Maybe not early, a second-round pick. He showed some flashes in Summer League, as we're going to talk about pretty briefly here. His shooting was on display. His shooting has always been one of his strengths. His mobility on the boards was good. He's had some really athletic plays. I think one of the either Hawks beat writers or reporters or someone who works in the Hawks media realm pointed out was that, as is the case with someone who's this inexperienced at basketball, the screens was one cause of concern that weren't sound in any way. If that was Kevin Chouinard or Brad Allen, one of those guys, that was a concern, and it's something that's easily fixable. There are coaches that are there to teach that kind of technique, whether it be Quinn Snyder or whether it be the assistant. This is a made up position, assistant specialist for technique of screens, like that kind of thing. Like, there are people that are there to help. I think also just his shooting, mobility, defense, a lot of the stuff that were coming in as strengths proved to be strengths, and some of the stuff that was coming as weaknesses are just inexperience proved to be inexperience, and that proved to be a weakness. That's perfectly normal for a guy, and he outperformed some of the expectations for being a second-round pick center on a team with Jalen Johnson didn't play. We expected that we might see him at some point. We did not see him, and AJ got shut down after the first, I believe, game or two. And obviously, we talked about Bufkin not having the greatest summer league as well. So he was one of the guys, definitely a bright spot on that team that had a chance to continue in the bracket. Obviously, the tiebreakers and stuff like that didn't work out for us to continue into the championship bracket. But Mo Gay was a solid piece in summer league, and hopefully he can become that backup center once we see what happens to Capella, and then we'll see what happens to our old and now recently new friend Bruno Fernando.
Yeah, that man Bruno, of course, got his stuff guaranteed, so it looks like he and Vita Krejci could possibly end up being the 14th and 15th man on this team. Going into the season, I mean, I guess Garrison Matthews and guys of that sort, even Wesley Matthews will be in the being in the running. But Micah, do you think some of this timeline stuff that Dylan and I are saying are a realistic thing about Muhammad? And you probably saw the most film out of him out of all three of us in the summer league. Just what were your initial thoughts, and do you agree with Dylan and I?
Well, I personally was surprised when I seen the Hawks sign him to a regular NBA contract and not a two-way contract, given that he is a second-round pick. But, watching the Summer League, he's a very exciting player. And, like many have said, he hasn't even been playing basketball for a full 4 years yet. And to see the type of talent he is and the short amount of time he's been playing basketball is really it's cool to see. And I don't see him being getting into too much running this year, whether Capella's traded or not, given that he has to develop. And watching the Summer League as games progress, from the first game, he trying to dunk on people to, going to the later games. You could tell one of the coaches told him to, bring it down so he didn't injure himself because, he's playing very recklessly. But I think he's a very good, player for them to develop, and he has a lot of potential. But as of this year, I don't see him doing much for this team, but I could be wrong, but that's just what I see as of this year.
And then a follow-up for you, Micah, before we get into UGA and the Falcons, anything Atlanta United related as well, because I know we didn't get a chance to speak on them last episode. Of course, they're in a break as of right now internationally, but we'll talk about them every once in a while on the show for sure, including this episode. Any other Summer League post roster movements that you were surprised about, or you want to update us with, Micah? What happened with the Brady Mannix of the world? Of course, Seth Lundy was chosen over Tyrese Martin. Just what is the College Spark roster looking like as of right now, and were there any other moves that you think we should all be aware of?
I mean, outside of Tyrese Martin being waived and Wesley Matthews being signed, it hasn't been too much going on with the Hawks that we've been able to see. But to speak on the Hawks waiving Martin and choosing to stick with Lundy and Krejci, like I said, Martin didn't get much playing time. He wasn't with the Hawks for a lot of time. And Krejci, he was with the Hawks most of the year. And, he was a good locker room guy. He was good. Every play we score, he's up on his feet with and, John Collins was also that type of guy, but losing him, that's losing, that enthusiasm, that locker room type of guy. I think
And Krejci brings that as well. He's very much like that.
I think that played a role in the Hawks choosing to keep Krejci on this team. But like I said, outside of the Hawks waiving Martin and signing Matthews, it hasn't been much that we've been able to see.
And really quickly,
Dylan, do you have any follow-ups?
College Park.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned College Park. As Micah also said, don't think that Muhammad is going to get too much of a run in the NBA this year. And again, he was signed to a contract. I'm not sure exactly how G League assignments work. Nobody does. It's all different now than it used to be. If he's able to be in College Park, I think he'd be an impactful starter, which could then lead to some more minutes down the line if something happens with Fernando or Capella or anything like that. Hopefully something happens with Capella, but if anything happens with Fernando, so I think he could get some reps down there and become valuable in maybe this season, but probably not until at least next season at the earliest.
And the thing with that was the first couple of years with Jalen Johnson. I know y'all don't like how Nate McMillan didn't want to play the young guys, but Jalen Johnson in College Park, the coach was calling him the LeBron of the G League, and you put Muhammad Gay down there, give him time to continue to play, continue to develop. I think that would be huge for him, seeing how Jalen Johnson came from the G League and how he came to play with Hawks and had an immediate impact. I think that'd be pretty good for Gay to go down to College Park and be able to play rather than just sitting on the bench and watching games the entire season.
And I feel like, as you said, Jalen Johnson is going into year 3, and it feels like he's basically barely a second-year player. Feels like he's still a rookie, being that he basically was wasted his entire first season while we wasted away with the Gallinari and John Collins injuries. We didn't call him up from College Park, and last year he didn't get a lot of run until really Snyder took over, and maybe that's another reason they'd like to keep Krejci, as Snyder would like to keep all the offensive toys possible going into his first full season. But I would love to see I don't know if we can count on the Jalen Johnson breakout that we're all expecting, because we've seen it with other players before. We heard that Cam Reddish was going to have a breakout. It didn't happen. Kevin Huerter didn't really happen. DeAndre Hunter hasn't happened. John Collins happened, and it was a PED thing. So I don't expect it, as much as I would love it. I don't know if we can expect Jalen and Onyeka to take these next steps, because just quite frequently the Hawks just haven't been able to do that with their players. They haven't been able to develop. That's why we got stuck where we were. We peaked too early and nobody was able to continue on. But I do agree with what you guys said. I feel like he was really not used well in his first 2 years. He's a year 3 player. He feels like he's barely going into year 2. Maybe feels like a rookie to some people. But I hope that this year he definitely gets a lot more run. If he's the starting 4, or if he's the 6th or 7th man off the bench along with Bogey, I do expect a much better year out of Jalen Johnson. Guys, any final thoughts about the Hawks before we move on to the Georgia Bulldogs? Well, I'll let these two fine gentlemen take the floor. I am not a Georgia fan, unlike these two gentlemen over to the right of me on screen. I think to the left on viewers.
I heard you say go Dogs.
Dylan's
screaming "Go Dogs" the other day. I got confused, I guess.
What? Either way, Dylan, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, if everything comes together properly, that you are going to be attending UGA in the fall. Being run a time crunch, we're gonna talk about the Bulldogs before we get to Flowery Branch and talk about the pro football team. Dylan, what's been going on in Athens, and what was some stuff going on with the SEC Media Days? We'll start off with based on what you've heard so far.
There's a lot of stuff going on compared to a typical off season. In the past month as well, there's been the AJC articles about the alleged criminal activity that's been going on in Athens with official visits, with Jamal Jarrett being one of those people named, and obviously some subpar journalistic intent, or does at least just actual results, because that reporter was fired. Mentioning 8 players or whatever it is, and only naming 1 or 2, and one of which was kicked off the team immediately, and Adam Anderson. There's some. Hopefully that's resolved by now. They did send like a cease and desist letter or whatever it was, or a retraction letter, to which ended up being, the right thing to do at that time. And there's been plenty of discourse about this, I'm sure, but that's not a good situation to be in for Georgia. They've had another, I believe in the last few weeks, they had another speeding situation, which it happens. And I feel like I saw some random guy on Twitter saying, "Oh yeah, I went 90-30 when I was a freshman at UGA. Nobody cares. I'm not a football player." So I mean, it's magnified because it's the UGA football team, and they had the situation in January, which is obviously tragic and unfortunate. The program is not in ruin like a lot of people think it could be or hope it could be, but there's cause to be a little bit reserved about the off-field aspects. As far as on the field, we can get into that. The more exciting part, the team is looking for a three-peat, obviously, having a new quarterback, which should be Carson Beck. The depth at tight end is very, very impressive. Offensive line is always good, and it's continuing to be good for this coming year. Cedric Van Pran returning is big time. Losing Jones, losing Willock, losing the previous year, Salyer, Schaefer, a bunch of guys that are, been big time contributors. We didn't take a step back, and hopefully it continues to not take a step back. Got some guys that are going to be, starting like Amarius Mims, that kind of thing, Ratledge, all those guys that are highly touted 5-star, 4-stars that are just, sitting and waiting. And now they started a little bit last year, got some reps, and now they're going to be the guys this year. Defense is always going to be great. Got some 2 All-American candidates in Starks and Bullard at safety. Corner is my main concern. I'll get to that in a second. Linebacker is great. Got Smile Munden, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Xavier Sori, a bunch of other guys like that. D-line, some guys that are under the radar like Tyron Ingram Dawkins has been pretty good. Jamal Jarrett coming in, hopefully he makes an impact, as well as a guy from North Carolina that plays D-tackle. We've heard that before, Jordan Davis. There's some exciting pieces on the team, as well as Marvin Jones, Michael Williams, 2 edge rushers that are made some big plays, especially Michael Williams in the semifinal against Ohio State. Corner is what I wanted to mention. It's not up to par of what it's been. Even last year we had Ringo, but Ringo didn't perform as well as some people thought he should have, and as well as I'm sure as well as he thought he should have, knowing the projection that went into the season that he could be a first-round pick as well. There is cause to be concerned there, but Kirby Smart was a DB. He's a head coach. They got Muschamp still there, obviously. Fran Brown's a great DB coach and recruiter. They will be fine, and there's not really a tough matchup on their schedule. Florida, Tennessee in Neyland is the place that would be a loss if there would be a loss to happen that I would bet on. Georgia has beat Tennessee and Neyland by an average of 30 points the past few years. I'm not too worried about that. You also mentioned SEC Media Day. I know if y'all have anything to add on before I get to Media Day, Micah, would love to hear your thoughts about that as well.
I mean, just going back to what you're saying with off the field stuff, the spotlight has been on UJ with all that stuff since January, and it's like you were saying, because they're football players, they're getting more of the spotlight, and you would think it'd be something where you just like stop doing out. I don't understand why. You seen what happened in January, and they continue to do it, but that's them. But going back on the field, I have a question for you. I'm gonna drop my prediction first. I'm gonna say Bowers will have 18 plus touchdowns this season, And my question for you, Dylan, is who do you see as a bigger threat to UJ this year, Tennessee or Bama, or do you not see either of them as a threat to the team?
Personally, the short answer is neither one really, because neither of them have a quarterback that's proven. Same could be said about Georgia. Carson Beck isn't a proven quarterback by any means, but the rest of the roster is as good as it's been in the past few years. It is still up to that level. Joe Milton has a cannon for an arm. Does that mean he has aim? Not particularly. They lost Jalen Hyatt. They lost Cedric Tillman to the draft, obviously. So those are going to be some guys that the production is hard to replace with Heupel's system of just the receivers get open all the time, and it's not even that difficult for a guy like Hendon Hooker, who isn't like the most unbelievably talented guy in the world, to have a very good season. And before the ACL injury, which unfortunately ended his college career, now he's in Detroit. I could easily see Milton having a great season, but that defense is now enough to stop even a good offense, which Georgia has a good offense, and the running backs I didn't even mention. The running backs are great and stacked and hope to be healthy, with both Robinsons, obviously one being the freshman coming in at the end of the depth chart, Milton, Edwards, all that depth that's there, and that's going to be tough for Tennessee. As far as Bama, again, quarterback concern, Jalen Milroe is not a good thrower of the football. They have other options, but I think that will be the one they end up going with. He doesn't have the receivers. He doesn't have the great skill position guys around him that some of the guys before him had, with like Tua and Bryce and everything like that, and Mac, that can help him that much. I feel like it's Bama's best team recently, at least, including quarterback. Bryce Young was the best quarterback they've had in a long time as far as college, and he was not able to get a national championship in his 2 years as a starter. There's been teams that have been better, teams that have been worse on paper that have beat them for sure. They don't have the talent around, what we assume to be Jalen Milroe. Defense is always going to be good because it's Bama. Cleveland McKinstry is amazing. Dallas Turner is unbelievable. Neither one of them seem to be threats to me. As far as the SEC, I could put LSU in that category. I might even say above Tennessee and Alabama. Jane Daniels is a good quarterback. And, whether they have a contingency plan, Nussmeier obviously dotted UGA's defense up a little bit in the SEC championship. Harold Perkins on defense is unbelievable, coming as a rising sophomore. Going back to offense, Malik Neighbors should be a great receiver for the Tigers this season. So I don't think either one can be listed as too much of a threat between Tennessee and Bama. I think LSU could be the most concerning. But that's for the SEC championship. That's not for a team that gets played during the regular season. And we'll see if UGA LSU becomes a rematch for the second year in the SEC championship, and see if that continues throughout the next few years while we're seeing the both teams kind of rise, and LSU getting back to where they were a few years ago with being competitive at the highest level.
And it's interesting, to speak on something real quickly. You mentioned about the on-field play, Dylan. I'm looking at Georgia's schedule even as just a fan, and like the worst I could see them happening is them going 11-1, winning the SEC championship at 12-1. That gets you in the playoffs. Like that's all Georgia could has to do. I could see a world where some team upsets them because you look at the Blue Bloods. It happens every couple of years. I mean, it almost happened in the Missouri game last year. Georgia woke up at the end, and that was all they needed. They did not lose a single game last year. You mentioned that the only game that looks scary at all to you guys on paper is the Tennessee game at the end of November. You have no idea what they're going to look like as of that point. You like Joe Milton, but you don't know if they're going to be this one-loss team they were last year. They could be 8-3, 7-3 going into that matchup, and Georgia's going to be like, well, okay, if we lose this, then we're still in the driver's seat. No one else is going to be touching us. Kentucky is finally coming back down to earth with Will Levis leaving. Florida's in a mess. Missouri and South Carolina are really never going to be relevant. So it's really Georgia is the Kings right now, and that's why they've won back-to-back. And legitimately, the worst case scenario is they find a way to get upset, like the South Carolina game in 2019. I could see it happening. It's been a couple years. The Clemsons of the world, they get upset every couple of years. Alabama, they get upset every couple of years. It seems like every other year they lose a game in September or in October and go on and win it or get to the national championship. But even if Georgia goes 11-1, because no way in hell are they losing more than one game in this regular season. You win the SEC championship, they're going to be a heavy favorite against anybody that comes out of the West, whether it's Alabama, whether it's LSU, whether it's Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss finally getting there. You win the SEC at either 12-1 or 13-0, you're in the playoff. And if they get into the playoff, they can beat anybody. There's a reason they're back-to-back champions. And, I think they could even have an upgraded quarterback this year. I know you guys love Stetson. It makes sense. But I feel like if Carson Beck does his thing this year, maybe being that your offense has a new coordinator as well, I can see this offense. I could see the Georgia offense becoming even better, and maybe the quarterback play taking another level up. And they already haven't been able to beat you guys the last 2.5 years with Stetson Bennett. Imagine it with a better offensive coordinator in place. And because I will say, I think from a fan's perspective, y'all's offense the last couple of years has been very vanilla. It's been a lot of tight end screens, a lot of isolation with the running back university assets that you guys have. But it's worked, and that's really all it's needed. But now that there's a little bit of a tune-up in there, change at quarterback, change at coordinator, I could see where you guys are even better on the offensive side of the ball, and that's the least thing college football needs. And I know, Dylan, you're very shocked hearing this from me, but that's where I'm at, and that's where I could see. I could very easily see Georgia at least making the playoff. I don't know if they'll win 3 years in a row. It's very tough to three-peat anything, college or pro, or even at the amateur level. But I definitely do think Georgia will go 11-1 at worst, win the SEC championship at worst, at 13-0, 12-1, get in the playoff, and they got as good of a shot as anybody. But I guess we'll talk on the media days real quick. I'll throw it back over to you, Dylan. What have you heard from all your sources?
Media day, is always interesting, especially, again, this season being very different from others, that there was a expose style piece written that has now been heavily scrutinized and retracted, and involving the reporter being released from his contract. That's mainly what has been talked about. And that is not necessarily saying that's the right thing, which I believe it isn't, because again, the article was not sound. The on the field stuff is the more important part. The headlines, I guess you would say, I haven't really heard much about position battles or anything like that. I feel like most positions are set besides corner. There's just some, unproven guys that are headed in there. One of the headlines from the media day was that the transfer from Texas A&M, who went to, I believe, Bainbridge High School. He's from the same city that Kirby Smart is from. Smoke Bowie, Dion Smoke Bowie was released from the team, if you want to say. They parted ways, is how Coach Smart put it. That he after the spring game, he kind of wasn't as committed, and there's a reason that he transferred to Texas A&M. He had some issues there, and now he will not be part of the CJA team going forward. That was something interesting that I was looking forward to seeing if he can be a factor in the defense, whether it be as a depth guy in general. I mean, he hasn't done much in his college career, obviously, is why he transferred from Texas A&M to Georgia, and to see him not be committed enough to make this team also is disappointing. That Texas A&M class, that was absolutely insane with all the 5-stars and 4-star talent. Half those guys, as we all expected, I feel like, at least I did, half those guys are either in the transfer portal, in the case of Bowie, not on a team currently, getting zero playing time and not looking to get any playing time this coming season. Like LT Overton, I feel like was an interesting one because he reclassified as well from Milton High School, the edge rusher. I've had a lot of guys that have come there, a lot of guys that have, especially in that class a year or two ago, there's been not much production from those guys at all. So I think, again, with Smoke Bowie coming over here, he was hoping to have a good season. Stuff didn't work out. It's, the DB depth is still great. Especially the corner depth. The depth is great. Just the fact that we haven't seen the guys on the field is one headline I would bring up. Mike, I'm not sure if you've heard anything different from as far as headlines go, but I think that's been the main thing that's just been about the roster movement of Bowie, and then just getting ready for the season and workouts and everything like that. And then the season starts in about just over a month.
Real quick here, being that we did talk about UGA football, just want a one question basis for both you guys who I know do follow UGA basketball more than most Georgia fans. I know a lot about Mike White. He's always a guy who's been a great recruiter. He's always really good at a conference play. He always finds a way to fickle out. His teams usually make the tournament. I know year one at UGA didn't go quite exactly how he wanted towards the end, lost in the SEC tournament. Dylan, I'll start with you. Yeah, Mike White is is a mess. I know it's an improvement from what you guys had previously with Tom Crean, but he's still not the greatest coach in the world. He's just the same guy every year, has a great recruiting class, brings in guys from the portal, plays hell of a basketball. He's a hell of a basketball coach at a conference, but as soon as he get deep into SEC play, his team is just mid as ever. What are some early year two predictions for him real quick before we get to the Falcons?
Definitely. I think the only thing that can be expected as far as the prediction was the improvement. Obviously, you mentioned the SEC play was the issue last season for Georgia, as it has been, as you were saying, for Florida the past few years with Coach White at the head coach spot. We were starting out pretty well. We started out 10-2 with some out-of-conference wins, some good teams we played. Once the conference play came around, kind of struggled. The intensity just wasn't there. I feel like it just kind of fell off a little bit. Speaking of Tom Crean real quick, we'll never forgive him for that abomination of a season with Anthony Edwards on the team, which was unfortunate. So coming into year two for Mike White, and also coming into year two for the women's basketball as well with Coach Abrahamson, those teams are both going to be at least solid, I would hope. Especially I can talk a bit more about the men's basketball side. The recruiting class was good. They added Jalen Deloach, a guy from Berkmar High School in Lilburn from the Georgia, Gwinnett area, transferred from VCU, coming in as, I believe, 3 years of experience under his belt, a 2020 graduate. Added a guy that was coming to Georgia Tech, and Blue Kane from IMG. He's coming to Georgia. A guy from my high school, Norcross, Mari Jordan, coming to Georgia. The recruiting class is good, much better than last year. They're not relying as much on these mid-major 4th-year, 5th-year transfers like they had been, but, I can't think of any names off the top of my head. Will Roberts is one.
Mid-major Mike, back at it.
Mid-major Mike, right. I've heard that for sure. I feel like the recruiting has taken an uptick. Got Silas DeMary as well. He was a USC commit for a little bit until the whole insane USC point guard saga came about with Bronny, with Boogie, and then with Isaiah Collier as well from the Marietta area. There's some talent there as well as Silas DeMary. They have some guys returning, like M.A. Moncrief is one that's looking to be a big contributor this year. I think a winning record is at the very, very least the expectation. I don't remember the exact record from last season, but I know that, again, the SEC play became an issue. Making the NCAA tournament would be we didn't even make the NIT last year, I don't believe. Making the NCAA tournament would be amazing. I think this team can do it, but it's just about how Mike White and the players gel and everything like that, and the schedule being an SEC schedule towards the end of the year. There are tough teams in the SEC. So I think just being a solid team that can give some runs to some of the top teams would be I would be pleased with that as a year or two, just considering what he inherited from Tom Crean, the hellscape that he left, and what he's trying to build for the next, hopefully, the few years that he continues to be successful, more successful than he's been previously at Florida as well.
I can't speak too much to UGA basketball, but as Dylan said, the men's team did improve this year, but I expect them to continue improving. And like you said, winning record is something what we should expect. And like he also said, making it to the NIT is also a good goal. And with the women's basketball, they made it into the tournament last year, but they ran into LSU. I'm expecting them to make it back to the tournament again. And I don't know if y'all watched the women's college basketball, but LSU ended up winning the championship. And that was unfortunate for Georgia to run into them, but I definitely expect them to make it back.
I just want to mention that LSU team, obviously, adding Haley Van Lith this past offseason is pretty massive for them. Obviously, Angel Reese coming back. They just had a big representation at the ESPYs a few weeks ago as well with, best women's sports, I believe. Not sure how it didn't go to the Oklahoma softball team, but different story. the transfer addition again of Haley Van Lith, big time from Louisville, good scorer, been hyped up since probably sophomore, junior year of high school, same time as Paige Beckers as well from UConn. That team is going to be nasty in the SEC, but I think UGA has the talent, and they buy in pretty well. They took LSU to, I believe that game went to overtime as well. If not, it went to down to the very wire of the fourth quarter. They have the talent to push these teams, even to an extent that the UGA men's does not at the moment, just because of the talent discrepancy between where they are and the other teams. In the women's tournament, I mean, they can make a run. The Sweet 16 appearance, would be amazing. Again, Coach Abe is coming over from UCF. She's had some success there. Now coming over here, he's got some good players coming in. So both men's and women's basketball teams are looking up, which is not something that we could say previously in the past few years, especially the men's team. So really, anything that's an improvement over what we've been seeing would be a step in the right direction. Anything above that is just an added bonus.
One thing I will say, it feels like LSU has a chance to win every damn title that there is in college sports. They're just so freaking good at everything. I'm very jealous of fans of LSU for sure. It seems like they are one of the most blessed college organizations, I guess you could say, in the entire country. But you mentioned one point. I know you got to go soon, so if you do end up dropping off, Micah and I will pick things up from here. Not really a lot of Atlanta United stuff going on this week, as we mentioned already. Once guys, like they're in the middle of a break. They came off their last loss against Orlando, their biggest rival, but they're still in the middle of the standings. Still one of the better teams they put out there the last couple of years. Hopefully, they have a chance to make some moves and get back up towards the top of the poll come playoff time, which I don't think is till like November. It's a really long season. I don't watch every Atlanta United game, but I feel like I watch about every 3 or so this year. The Dream, not a lot really went on this week. I know they just recently had the All-Star game. Maybe next podcast, Micah, we'll give you a segment to talk about the Dream. And for Georgia Tech, nothing really too controversial or too crazy to talk about this week when we get Connor on the show. Finally, the last of the 4 co-hosts that you guys have yet to meet. And it looks like Dylan is going to have to end his night a little shortly. We appreciate you making it on, man. And Dylan, before you go, make sure you drop your stuff one more time. Where can we find you?
All right. So I appreciate y'all for getting this recording set up and everything like that. I'm glad I can make it to this one. Twitter is, did I put my name as Clearfield Media, Dylan Clearfield Media? One of those. Twitter is Clearfield Media. Instagram is Dylan Clearfield Media. I interview athletes, prospects in the Atlanta area, UGA related guys that are in the NFL, high school athletes that are headed to the SEC. Take pictures of different events, football and basketball around Atlanta, and now I'll be continuing to do that while I'm at UGA in the fall. So I would appreciate any support on these platforms. Again, it's Clearfield Media on Twitter and Dylan Clearfield Media on Instagram. And again, would appreciate it. And then y'all have a good night.
Yes, sir.
And we hope to have you on for some Falcons news as soon as possible. And we're sorry that we ran a little long tonight, but we do appreciate you making your debut on this, hopefully, long, illustrious podcast. So we'll dabble with another team that we're finally is happy is in a lot of a better spot than they have been the last half decade, and that's the Atlanta Falcons. Down in Flowery Branch, training camp kicking off here within the next week or so. But first, we're going to talk about something that happened not at Flowery Branch, but on site of the stadium itself. I'm sure you guys have seen the viral video now of the robot dogs that are, like, I guess you could say, protecting the outside of the stadium. You could say they're terrorizing the homeless. You could say that they're just making sure that no one is bumbling around the stadium in the late AM hours. What was if you guys have seen the video, I know you have Micah first, and I'll ask you second, Dylan. What was your original reaction to the whole viral moment? And do you think it's funny that Mercedes-Benz is protected by those robot dogs?
Yeah, I seen the video. I didn't think much about it. I thought it was one of those food delivery, but like you said, they protect the stadium. I didn't know that part, but that's kind of crazy. I just thought it was a food delivery robot.
All right, so Micah, continuing on, with the Atlanta Falcons, it seems like the team didn't have a lot of news that came out this week. We're mostly just social media antics, and we'll get into them as much as possible. But one of the things that came out that you wanted to talk about, Falcons Hall of Fame quarterback Matt Ryan is continuing to get slandered for whatever reason. floor is yours. I know you wanted to talk about what you saw last week. It's ridiculous how it continues to happen.
Well, the post that made me come up with this topic was one of Alex posted a question asking, does Matt Ryan does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? And of course, my comment was that he does. And one of the things he said was that his career will always be stained by 23. And I'm just scrolling through the comments. All I'm seeing is 28 doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame and all this. And I just don't understand it because Matt Ryan was an MVP, Offensive Player of the Year. Like he did so much for the team. He has stats to back up all of it. And even going back to the Super Bowl, 28-3 was nowhere near his fault. He had a great game. And because a lot of people blame 28-3 on him for coaching issues. They blame 28-3 on him for the defense giving up all those points in the second half. I don't know much more people expected out of Matt Ryan for him to do after putting up 28 points in the first. So
and this is something I kind of want to say once, maybe twice on the history of this podcast and not have to bring up a lot ever again. With that game specifically, but it's 2023. I'm not trying to talk about a game that happened in February 7th, 2017 forever. It happened. We got to live with it. The whole organization has basically changed since then. But what I will say is this, kind of what you said. Matt Ryan is not the reason the Falcons lost that Super Bowl. He's not. And people that say so are just idiotic. I'm going to put it simply like that. Matt Ryan had the third highest, I don't know if it's changed since then, but as of the year that the Super Bowl was played, he had the third highest QBR in Super Bowl history. 3 or 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He played a pretty much perfect game. So for the people that say that he was the reason they lost, you're just stupid. That's all there is to it. I don't know that Matt Ryan will always have a lot of haters. There are a lot of people that say Vic was always their quarterback. They'll never like Matt Ryan. And Matt Ryan can never win the big game. And so, yeah, there were some games that we needed more from him. But that was not a year that we ever needed more from him. He was the almost unanimous MVP of the league that year. Again, third highest QBR. No turnovers. The only thing I could maybe agree with is he could have maybe taken a little bit more control down the end and said, you know what, Tevin, Devontae, I'm going to hand it to you. I'm going to get this thing to Matt. We're going to clinch it. I can maybe see that argument. But being that he did put up 28 points in the Super Bowl, he did get his team across midfield multiple times after they scored that 28th point. He was trusting Kyle Shanahan. Dan Quinn was not the reason the Falcons made the Super Bowl. It was Kyle Shanahan. Pretty much Kyle Shanahan. And he was trusting Kyle Shanahan to finish the job. He had got them there from August and training camp all the way to that game against the evil empire in the New England Patriots. And it didn't go the way we wanted, but just to put it out there one last time, Matt Ryan is not the reason the Falcons lost the Super Bowl, and Matt Ryan will never be the reason the Falcons lost the Super Bowl. And so I'm glad we can leave it at that. But it's really it's time to move on.
And one more thing I want to add.
Go ahead.
For all the people that spam the comments 28-3, 28-20, we do not care no more. I've said it so many times where we don't care. It's just another comment. You just wasting your time. That honestly,
it's just all they have to say now, man.
Yeah.
I think it would hurt more if they said something along the lines of like, oh, the Saints swept you guys last year. Or, oh, you fumbled a fumble. Those type of things hurt more now, like dropping the Week 1 game against the Saints via Mariota's QB sneak or Taquan Graham fumbling Austin Eckler's fumble back. Those type of things hurt more than the Super Bowl will never go away. I understand that. But, we were 13-14 when it happened. We're 18-19 now. We're about to be grown men. Like, we can't really care anymore. The whole entire roster has changed, minus Jake Matthews and Grady Jarrett. 51 other members aren't the same. They play in a new stadium. They have a new offensive coordinator, new head coach, new defensive coordinator, new GM, new uniforms. It doesn't even feel like the same organization being the 5 years they just had previously. So I will always be one who respects Matt Ryan. I did not grow up with Michael Vick, but that does not mean I hate Michael Vick. Like a lot of people that love Matt Ryan hate Vick and simultaneously. It doesn't have to be like that, guys. It really doesn't. And I hope that, eventually we come to a point where it's not always going to be like that. But another Falcons player that is getting a lot of slander going into his third year of the season, the number 4 pick in the 2021 NFL draft, Kyle Pitts. The admin was going crazy, showing off a lot of his workouts this week, showing how that knee's working. Hopefully, if it's Heinicke, if it's Ridder, I'm guessing it's going to be Ridder for most of the season. That's the plan. I hope it's him for the entire season. We hope that he's going to get more targets this year, whether he's lining up at wide receiver, whether he's lining up at tight end. He got like 3 touchdowns in 9 games last year. He broke the yardage rookie record with a ghost of Matt Ryan in a full season. I know he only scored 1 touchdown that year, but last year in like 9 games, he had 3 touchdowns. Could have maybe been targeted a little bit more in the red zone by Matt Ryan, but last year the targets weren't an issue. Mariota threw him the ball. He just couldn't get it to him accurately. Kyle Pitts, I think, was like the second or maybe even the most out of all the starting caliber weapons in the NFL. They did a measuring, and he had the most inaccurate targets by his QB last year. He never got a chance to play with Ridder. His season was over by the time Ridder took over in the month of December. But I just really don't understand people saying Kyle Pitts is a bust. We talked about this last episode, Micah. Like Jamar Chase, if he was on the Falcons, Devontae Smith, if he was on the Falcons, Jalen Waddle. If all these guys switch places, career archetypes are all going to change. If Kyle Pitts got drafted to the Bengals, he'd have. I don't know if he'd be Jamar Chase, but he would be looked at much better going into year 3 than he would have if he was here, or even Devontae Smith. If the Falcons had Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle or even Jamar Chase, they have nowhere near the reputation and the career mass that they've had the first 2 years with Matt Ryan last year, with Matt Ryan's last year and Marcus Mariota. They just don't. So I understand the fantasy owners being upset, and I do think the Falcons should target him the ball more. As a Gators fan at heart, I do want to see that happen. I'm always going to defend him. But, like, Micah, what have you seen out there that's been egregious, like Matt Ryan slander with Kyle Pitts?
I mean, it's crazy that people are writing him off as if, like, with Matt is in his career breaking the record for rookie yards, and Kyle Pitts, he has all of the potential, and as long as he's getting a target, catchable balls, I believe he showed everybody this year that he's a tight end that we expect him to be, the Falcons expect him to. And he's going to prove a whole bunch of people wrong this year.
Yeah, I just don't know why people expected him to be Travis Kelce in year 2. I don't. Like, I will agree the targets could be more. But last year there were targets that weren't at him. Year 1, sure, there could have been a lot more red zone targets, but he's still, with the ghost of Matt Ryan, put up 1.1 thousand yards. Last year in like 9-10 games, had 3 touchdowns, which was on pace for 6 or 7. It really wasn't that bad. I will agree. Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith have been better, but you just have to take everything else into context. But I do hope that he is more involved this year, and I do like seeing that knee being a lot more able to do workouts. One more topic before we get out of here tonight, before your phone ends, Micah, and everything really hits the fan. Training camp is officially kicking off next week. I should be out there on the 28th meeting members of the Falcoholic podcast, so a free shout out to another podcast that I absolutely adore listening to. What are some early training camp battles and storylines that you're going to be looking at before they suit up for their first preseason game, Micah? What are some stuff you're going to want to be hearing in the first week of August coming out on all the socials?
Well, there's not many battles outside the offensive line, because you got that quarterback set and our name in the QB1. You got your wide receiver one. You got Pitts, the starting tight end. It's not many battles. I just I'm just ready to see what this team turns into, because we finally went out and got pieces for this team with, like I said, Jesse Bates, Calais Campbell, Caden Ellis, Bud Dupree, and signing back our guys, and Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry, Lorenzo Carter, Keith Smith. I think this team has what we haven't had, and about the past 5 years, and we had a potential to be back in the playoffs. And like I said last episode, we will be back in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the plan. If they're not the NFC South champions, hopefully, they're a 10-win team, and if that's the case, 10 wins in the NFC should be good enough to make the playoffs, at least as of right now. So that's definitely the plan. I think what the Falcons did, like they went the more fun way with this free agency. Like they went quantity over quality, like we spoke about. But I heard a point last week, and I'm going to use it. Is they took all of their depth that was good and kept it, and instead of and finding new starters and replacing their depth, they turned their starters that were borderline guys into backups with a chance to have a better role and for them to grow. And they went out and they made the improvements at the positions they really needed to. And I think that's why this team looks even better right now. Guys like Taquan Graham and guys like Lorenzo Carter, who were okay last year. They weren't great, but they showed promise and they look like they could be parts of an NFL playoff football team, are now backups and are now depth pieces to the Calais Campbells and the David Onyematas of the world. Jesse Bates is, now overtaking the Darren Halls and the Jalen Hawkins and the DeMarco Hellams that have chances to grow. And that's where you build this depth in this culture, and just bringing in guys like Calais, bringing in guys like Jesse, bringing, John, the safety coach Gray down from Green Bay. Those type of things are what create a culture that the Falcons do not have. The Braves have a culture. The Falcons and Hawks do not, and that's the reason that the Braves are here. And the Hawks and the Falcons are always trying to fight with them to get that ground. And the Falcons, as we said last episode, I'm just so glad they went in every direction that Arthur Blank was doing under Thomas Dimitroff, Dan Quinn, and Mike Smith. They're going the complete opposite direction now, gutting everything. And I haven't disagreed with a lot of things that Arthur Smith and Thomas Dimitroff have done so far. So, yeah. So, yeah, guys, that'll be it for tonight's episode. We really appreciate you guys listening on the final, episode 2 of the Around the Atlanta podcast, or Around the A, whatever podcast platform you guys listen on. We really appreciate your time. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, whether it's on my YouTube channel, Dylan's YouTube channel, Micah's, if it's the channel itself, which I'm assuming you are watching. Make sure you guys give us a like, a comment, and a subscribe down below. If you guys see our clip outs on social media, we really appreciate you guys giving us your time. And hopefully you guys are hearing this episode on the 25th of July, the same night that the Braves had their first game with the Boston Red Sox. And we might have one more episode before the month of July wraps up. If not, we'll be on around the 1st of August to discuss the Braves trade deadline one more time and those first Falcons rumors that we were just talking about. But really glad you guys had a chance to meet Dylan tonight. We had a lot of technology issues. We're sorry for this episode getting out a little later than we expected. Thursday night, Micah was out of home a little longer than he expected, bumped our recording back. We had behind the scenes issues, but it allowed Dylan to come on with us tonight. He's got a lot of stuff set up now, so hopefully things won't go running as long as it has been. Again, it's only episode 2 of a podcast. We'll hope you guys give us a shot. We know it's not going to be as good as it hopefully is within the next couple months. But yeah, once again, thank you guys for watching. I am Blake Newsom, along for my co-host Micah Neal, Dylan Clearfield, and soon to be Connor Quinn. We appreciate you guys. Go A-Town. Peace out. And we hope you guys have a good night and a good weekend whenever you are watching. See ya.